Landing on My Heart Chapter 38 Cut. Walking out of the cafeteria, Cecile Ruan sneezed again. She was sure this time that someone must be scolding her behind her back, most likely Jiang Ziyue. This person is also a neurotic, tell her to stay away from Yu Chen. Did she do anything? In the past half a year, she has been hiding away when she sees Yu Chen, and she hasn't even said a few words. What else do you want from her? If you don't land in the future, you will be born flying all day long, right? I really want to have something with Yu Chen. Even if I fly in the sky, I can have a radio conversation or two. To put it bluntly, he still thinks too much of his own man, thinking that he is a treasure, and others want to rob it at a glance. I don't want to think about what kind of wind Yu Chen is in the World Airlines, who doesn't know him, who dares to marry a girl who is passing by, and is not afraid that he will directly save money on buying hats after marriage. Cecile Ruan felt that she should not express her thoughts so directly, and should put on a pitiful look and say to her, "I'm sorry, I didn't expect you to misunderstand. I have nothing to do with Captain Yu. In the future, I will try to pay attention to less contact with him." Just this paragraph, to ensure that she can't sleep tonight. But that's fine now. Cecile Ruan knew that other colleagues were receiving invitations one after another, and she was worried that this Jiang Ziyue would send her a copy next to her feelings. Now that she knows that she is so afraid of herself, and tears her face, she doesn't have to worry about this. What does that mean? This shows that Jiang Ziyue is praising his beauty in another way. When Cecile Ruan thought about this, he didn't know that he was suffering a wave of direct and rough rainbow farts online. Do you still ask models to shoot the promotional video now? Can't you use your own employees? 2 hours ago, the propaganda Weibo was just sent, and someone commented on the official Weibo of World Airlines, and the editor specially turned out to reply, "Not a model, this is my pilot." So the few official blog comments that are usually few immediately broke 1,000. Pilot sister. I can. Is there such a thing as appearance in the recruitment assessment criteria? If anything, I'm not coming. Sister is so beautiful, tell me the flight, I'm going to sit. Sure enough, it flew in the sky. This is a fairy in the sky. Okay, can't it? Female drivers are choking enough, can the plane of a female captain do it? Oh, some dicks still look down on women. Your mother gave birth to you just to make you discriminate against your mother. Do you yourself not see if you go to be a pilot, do you deserve it? Oh no, I forgot that pilots do not accept disabled people, and brain disabilities are also considered disabled. I can also have several other captains. Does anyone point the way to Weibo? After a night of fermentation, Weibo forwarded tens of thousands of messages, and World Airlines female pilots quietly climbed to the top 20 of the hot search list. Cecile Ruan woke up in the morning and her phone almost froze. The usually few Weibo posts suddenly flooded with various comments and private messages, and fans quickly rose for several days. Cecile Ruan was still a little confused, and found the root cause according to the content of everyone's private messages. But there were too many comments, and she had no way of knowing how these people turned to her Weibo. Her profile is a bus taken by the Seine a few years ago, and her Weibo nickname is "I am shoulder to shoulder with the sun" at first glance, so everyone is sure that this is her. Cecile Ruan opened her private messages again, most of them from girls. There are those who say they want to know, there are those who simply come to confess, and there are screaming chickens who only know how to send AA, of course. There are also private messages that express their wishes very simply and rudely, usually with only 2 words, covenant. Cecile Ruan is curious about where this kind of person's confidence comes from. Curiosity makes her pick one out and click in to read Weibo, and the desire to survive makes her immediately quit and block it completely. Being blown a rainbow fart by so many strangers, what woman can not be happy? Cecile Ruan took a screenshot and was about to send it to Bian Xian and Si Xiaozhen when the screen was suddenly interrupted by a call. She didn't save the number, but she knew who called. After connecting the phone, Cecile Ruan did not speak, and the other head was silent for a moment. Ruan is that female pilot above the World Aviation official Bo, today you. Cecile Ruan was still sitting on the bed, cross-legged, tilting his head and saying, Dong Xian's voice suddenly softened. Why didn't you tell me? I always thought you were still a flight attendant. You didn't ask me either. Dong Xian's sniffing voice came from the phone. Ruan, you have realized your dream, and my mother is very happy. Cecile Ruan listened, and there was nothing in her heart and nothing she wanted to say. Every time they call, they are always silent for no reason. Dong Xian also didn't understand why Cecile Ruan slowly became like this, and was very cold to her, sometimes even a little hostile. Ruan, you have your birthday today, I'll cook for you. No thanks. Cecile Ruan said, I made an appointment with a friend. Countless times he refused to meet, Dong Xian was already used to it. But today is different. The photos on the internet made her unable to return to her senses for a long time, and she couldn't believe that the daughter who was silent to her had changed so much. She especially wanted to see her. Then I can send you a cake. My friend will order me a cake. Alas, let's not talk about it, I'm going to work. Dong Xian inhaled and let out a long sigh. Okay, I won't bother you. Hanging up, Cecile Ruan lay down again and went back to sleep. On the other hand, after Cecile Ruan became the KPI koi of the World Airlines publicity department, the official blog quickly took advantage of the popularity to quickly publish a second wave of promotional copy, and very deliberately accompanied a few more photos of Cecile Ruan. Louis Fu looked at the Weibo comment, his face was calm, but he chuckled coldly, it's really loved. Bai Yang answered on the side, everyone who is not blind loves. Louis Fu looked at him, and the other party immediately looked at his nose and nose, pretending not to say anything. He clicked on Cecile Ruan's Weibo, glanced at the number of followers, and ordered, tell the propaganda department, stop in moderation, don't overconsume her. Good, Bo Yang was about to do it, but Louis Fu stopped him again, had everything been moved? Someone moved the arranger, and it should be done this afternoon. Louis Fu nodded, and Bo Yang turned and walked out. At the same time, a call came in from Louis Fu's mobile phone. He frowned, a little surprised, not knowing why Dong Xian would suddenly call him. All in Xinjiang Literature City, Auntie, what's wrong? I'm sorry to bother you, I wanted to ask you for a small favor. Well, you say. The female pilot on the World Airlines Weibo today, can you tell me about her flight today? I have something to do with her. I'm sorry, Auntie, I can't reveal this. While speaking, Louis Fu had already tuned out today's flight information. Cecile Ruan reached its maximum flight time this month and is off today. Dong Xian hesitated for a moment, and then asked, then you don't need to tell me the specifics, just tell me when she will probably get off the plane. Louis Fu laughed, Auntie, I have so many pilots under my hand, how can I know when everyone gets off the plane? After speaking, he asked, do you know her? Dong Xian let out a Louis Fu said, if you know, you can call her directly, is there no contact information? Dong Xian pretended to admit, I'm bothering you, I won't bother you with work first. Good, a beep sounded on the phone, Louis Fu held the phone, and the screen automatically returned to the little poor picture. Asterisk 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 in the evening, before the dark clouds could set, they swept in the western mountains, faintly prone to heavy rain. Louis Fu didn't let the driver send him and drove himself back to the Minchin apartment. On the way, bean-sized raindrops fell. Before entering the underground parking garage, he saw a black Porsche parked outside the gate, a middle-aged driver sitting in the driver's seat, and a woman standing next to the car, holding an umbrella in one hand and a cake in the other. Louis Fu did not meet Dong Xian much, and on rainy days, people could not see the appearance clearly, only felt familiar, until he got on the elevator. He remembered who this person was. Although he didn't know much about Cecile Ruan and Dong Xian, Louis Fu could probably guess that if Cecile Ruan wanted to see her, why did Dong Xian call him specifically to ask for flight information? But she didn't get any news from him, so she went to the trouble of checking her address. Louis Fu's finger was already about to touch the button on the 16th floor. Thinking about it, he moved down a little and pressed the 14th floor. The elevator came to a slow stop. Before the door was fully opened, Louis Fu heard the singing of the man outside running out of tune to Siberia. As the crack in the door slowly widened, Cecile Ruan, dressed in a red dress, slowly silenced her. She coughed, hiding her embarrassment of singing and showing a dignified smile. President Fu is off work. Louis Fu looked at her, in a good mood today. It's okay. Cecile Ruan went in and pressed the first floor, and the door slowly closed. When the elevator began to descend, she suddenly asked, are you going upstairs or downstairs? Go downstairs. Oh, Cecile Ruan was not in a good mood today. Bian Xian's grandmother was sick 2 days ago. She closed the door and went back to her hometown, and now she has not returned. Only Si Xiaozhen accompanied her on her birthday. Halfway through, I received another call from Dong Xian. Her concern could not be said to ruin the mood, but it was also not joy, walking in the middle ground, not up or down. But in the afternoon, she received countless rainbow farts from netizens, almost drowning her, feeling that she was really a fairy. Fairies naturally cannot be troubled by mundane things. At this time it is difficult to sing in front of Louis Fu, but the happiness cannot be suppressed, and the brain itself opens a concert, and the fingers are behind its back to play the beat. But God will always give a little punishment to the fairy of the lower mortals. When the elevator stops on the 8th floor, Cecile Ruan has a hunch that Jiro God has sent his celestial dog to catch her and return her to the heavenly court. Before the dog arrives, the sound arrives first. Cecile Ruan's brain concert was momentarily powered off. So how to say that it is still good to have rich people? If it weren't for a single-family villa, Cecile Ruan wouldn't have been able to ask residents of the same building not to own dogs. Silently, she retreated into the corner, clinging to the railing, and looked at the dog in fear. Cecile Ruan's nerves were tense and his palms were cold, but Yu Guang saw the shadows of the two reflected in the elevator door, getting closer and closer, getting closer and closer, until they coincided. The clear smell of fur on his body was getting closer and closer. Cecile Ruan's vision was slowly blocked by his body, and in front of him was his shirt, his collar. Cecile Ruan looked up at him and blinked, seemingly unaware of the operation. She was standing in the corner, and Louis Vu's body almost shrunk her into this right angle. Only unlike before, he was facing Cecile Ruan instead of his back to her. The narrow space suddenly shrunk so that it was difficult to even circulate breath. He also lowered his head and looked straight at her. His eyes were particularly calm, as if he was maintaining his habit of not squinting. But the gaze just fell motionless on her face. Cecile Ruan she can't look at Louis Vu like that. She didn't open her face, but her heartbeat still accelerated uncontrollably. No, you block the dog and block the dog. What do you mean by standing in front of me? The dog is blocking, but your posture is too strange. I already knew that it was better to face the dog than to face the dog man. In addition to the sound of the dog moving around, Cecile Ruan could only hear his own breathing and heartbeat. When she lowered her eyes, Louis Vu could clearly see the brown eyeshadow and upward eyeliner on her eyes, as well as her long eyelashes that were brushed up. He recalled that it seemed like the first time he had seen her put on makeup in more than half a year. Dressed up so beautifully, who are you going to meet? Cecile Ruan. The focus of the whole sentence, she grasped the word beautiful. And she found that she accepted thousands of rainbow farts today and forwarded them to Si Xiaozhen to see. But Louis Vu said beautiful, and she actually blushed. She whispered 2 words, friend, male and female. Cecile Ruan's voice was lower. What's your business? Just ask. He said slowly, male and female. Have you asked twice casually? Cecile Ruan didn't want to answer, but the shadow above her head had a sense of oppression, so heavy that she couldn't lift her head. Man, oh. Louis Vu seemed to know that Cecile Ruan said this on purpose, and asked, are you still home that night? Not back. Then I'll send you over. All in Xinjiang Literature City, his tone was too direct and not negotiative at all. No thanks, are you sure? The elevator stopped on the 1st floor at this time, the door slowly opened, and the sound of crackling rain came in outside. Cecile Ruan. She closed the window before going out, concentrating on makeup, completely oblivious that it had begun to rain outside. The dog owner pulled the dog out, just took 2 steps and was stunned. Cecile Ruan thought a little and immediately pressed the close button. By the time the dog owner reacted, the door was closed. But Louis Vu was still standing. Cecile Ruan reached out and pushed his chest, and at the same time went to press the button on the negative 1st floor, and said urgently, go fast, go fast. When he arrived at the parking lot, Cecile Ruan got into the passenger seat and pulled out the seat belt buckle, when he suddenly thought of something and chuckled. Louis Vu, what are you laughing at? Nothing. Cecile Ruan said, I just think your co-pilot is quite comfortable. Louis Vu nodded, not everyone can sit. Cecile Ruan didn't open his face and didn't speak. Next, there is only one direction for this topic. A man's co-pilot does sometimes have a special meaning. At this moment, Si Xiaozhen suddenly called. Today's heavy rain, weather fusion, many aircraft routes to be changed. Si Xiaozhen as a dispatcher, cannot leave, must work overtime. Nor did it mean to put pigeons, the work is like that. Cecile Ruan understands, but also loses. Louis Vu put his hands on the steering wheel and turned to look at Cecile Ruan. Friends aren't coming. Sounds a little bit gloating. Cecile Ruan turned his head and did not speak. Louis Vu began to unfasten his seatbelt. Then go back. Cecile Ruan did not speak or object. It was raining heavily, and if she was eating alone in the restaurant, and today was her birthday, the loneliness index would be too high. Re-entering the elevator, Cecile Ruan was at the bottom of the air pressure, long gone from the euphoria he had when he went out. She hung her head and went to press the 14th floor, but Louis Fu suddenly pulled her hand away. Come upstairs with me for dinner. Without waiting for Cecile Ruan to answer, he pressed the 16th floor. Okay, depressed, Cecile Ruan didn't want to struggle or talk. She didn't want to eat alone on her birthday. Louis Fu is sometimes barely a person, so make do. On the 16th floor, Louis Fu unbuttoned his coat while pressing his fingerprints. When the door opened, he suddenly thought of something, turned around and smiled. You are dressed so beautifully today, and in the end, I am not the only man to see. Cecile Ruan said with a smile, yes, cheap you. After entering, he took off his coat directly, put it on the sofa, and walked towards the kitchen in his shirt. Cecile Ruan poked in, don't order takeout. Nope, all in Xinjiang Literature City, you know how to cook. Okay, Louis Fu opened the refrigerator, looked at the fresh food that the nanny filled him with, and asked, what do you want to eat? Full of Han seats. Cecile Ruan raised her eyebrows and smiled, is that okay? Louis Fu ignored her, reached out and rummaged through the refrigerator, and looked back at her, longevity noodles, eat or not. Gate 39. Landing on My Heart Chapter 39. Cecile Ruan leaned against the kitchen door, and as Louis Fu turned her back to her, she looked at her unscrupulously. When he turned to get the bowl and chopsticks, she looked away again. How do you know it's my birthday? All in Xinjiang Literature City, I've seen your resume. Louis Fu spoke lightly. Cecile Ruan snorted, oh, yes, are you so caring about your employees? In fact, at noon today, Cecile Ruan received a congratulatory text message from the personnel department of World Airlines, and told her that she was free to go to the personnel department to receive her birthday gift. This is the tradition of World Airlines, and every employee will have treatment on their birthday. Did you ask knowingly? Louis Fu didn't look up, turned on the faucet to wash the greens, and the faint sound of running water sounded at the same time as his answer, make longevity noodles for each employee. Am I the director or the head chef? Oh, then she's a special treatment. Cecile Ruan lifted his chin and the corners of his mouth curled, then I'll add an egg. Louis Fu didn't even lift his head, picked up the 2 eggs he had prepared, knocked them, and the shiny egg whites and yolks slid into the pan, and it sounded. A small pot of boiling water, pan-fried eggs, some greens piled up in the sink, all of which he did very well, looked slow, but clean. I didn't expect him to say that he could cook and was not bragging. It wasn't until Louis Fu turned to look at her that Cecile Ruan found herself standing in the doorway looking for a long time. But the eyes were on the same page, and it seemed a little inappropriate for her not to say something. And she walked over tentatively, need my help? No, you go to the living room and sit, don't look at me here. Cecile Ruan's footsteps stopped, then he rolled his eyes and turned to leave. Oh, who would like to look at you? But the living room is really boring. Louis Fu is also quite boring. In such a large living room, there is nothing but the necessary furniture, not even greenery, and the only living thing may be Cecile Ruan himself. It's that this floor-to-ceiling window is not bad. If it is not raining heavily, it should be quite comfortable to stand here and watch the sunset. There is also a lounge chair and glass table next to it, so if you have a little fruit in the evening, it is good to see the stars in summer. She looked elsewhere, and the doors of several rooms were closed, and there was nothing to see. Cecile Ruan wandered around the living room boredly, and before he knew it, he turned to the kitchen. She poked her head in, is it okay? Why are you so slow? Okay, you go to the restaurant and sit. When Louis Fu came out with the bowl, Cecile Ruan was wiping lipstick with a tissue. What do you wipe? Cecile Ruan glanced at him, not really wanting to explain it to such a straight man. Don't wear lipstick when you eat. Louis Fu, it's beautiful. Cecile Ruan, Louis Fu, what's going on today? Are you in heat? How did you praise her so simply and rudely again and again? She continued to rub her lipstick indiscriminately. I won't show you if it looks good. Louis Fu smiled and handed her the chopsticks, eat quickly. The noodles in front of him were fragrant, the golden eggs were steaming with a few vegetables. Cecile Ruan's stomach began to clamor, but his mouth couldn't help but say, there are so many, I may not be able to finish eating. Louis Fu, can't finish deducting the year-end bonus. Anyway, his eyes plainly told Cecile Ruan, don't pretend. Cecile Ruan pouted, raised eyebrows, and nodded. 1 second he said she was good-looking, the next he treated her like a pig. Okay, the boss has the final say. 10 minutes later, a bowl of noodles is served. Faced with the empty bowl and Louis Fu's eyes, Cecile Ruan didn't know what to say. Maybe she was too hungry, maybe this bowl of noodles really tasted good, and she hit herself in the face with a loud slap in the sky. Fortunately, just when she was embarrassed, her phone rang. But when he picked up the phone, Cecile Ruan's face visibly changed. The tone is also quite stiff. How did you know I lived here? No thanks, I've already eaten. It's dark and it's still raining, you go back. Cecile Ruan sighed, turned his head to see the heavy rain outside the window, and frowned. Okay, wait a minute. Hung up the phone, and her brow did not loosen. She didn't want to go down and take it, but Dong Xian meant that if she didn't take it, she wouldn't leave today. It's so annoying. All in Xinjiang Literature City. Cecile Ruan's gaze finally fell on Louis Fu, looked around twice, and whispered, Boss, is there an umbrella? What are you going to do? Go downstairs and get something. Louis Fu looked out the window. The sky was crushed by darkness, and bean-sized raindrops snapped mercilessly on the windows, flying wildly with the fierce wind. Can you go with such heavy rain? Well, so I wanted to ask you to help me get it. After 2 seconds of silence, Louis Fu stood up somewhat helplessly. Go wash the dishes. Okay, Cecile Ruan agreed almost without hesitation, but seeing the rain outside, he felt a little guilty. Boss, go slowly. After speaking, the two acted separately. In addition to these 2 sets of chopsticks in the kitchen, the other Louis Fu had already washed them, so Cecile Ruan took less than 3 minutes before and after. She walked to the floor-to-ceiling window and looked down. The floor was too high, and the heavy rain made it almost impossible to see the ground. I don't know how long it took for Louis Fu to return. The white shirt on his body was almost soaked, clinging to his body, and the lines of his muscles loomed. He put away his umbrella and placed the cake on the table beside him, his dark eyes looking over, his eyelashes moisture, and stared at Cecile Ruan. You're so torturous. Cecile Ruan stood in front of him with his back to his back, a little panicked by his eyes, and immediately threw the towel hidden behind him at him. Hurry up and wipe you. Louis Fu grabbed the towel, wiped his arm, and said nonchalantly, I saw her when I came back today. Do you know her? Oh, my mother. Cecile Ruan paused. You know each other too, right? Louis Fu was. Cecile Ruan is not strange. Louis Fu and Jing Yuan know. That must also know Dong Xian. She didn't say anything more. Louis Fu added, she just asked what our relationship was. Cecile Ruan paused, suddenly a little nervous. What did you say? Even if it is not Dong Xian, if it is someone else, when Louis Fu sees Louis Fu helping her get the cake, he will be curious about the relationship between the two. I said we were. He seemed to hesitate deliberately, and looked at Cecile Ruan with a slightly questioning look. Friend. Yes, Cecile Ruan nodded along with his words, as if to himself, we are friends. Louis Fu threw the towel aside, walked outside the door of a room, held the doorknob in his hand, and waved his head at Cecile Ruan. Come here. His wet appearance, his voice was low. Inexplicably, there is a feeling of invitation into the refrigerator. Cecile Ruan stood still. What for, Louis Fu? So since it's a friend, I'll give you a birthday present, will you accept it? Cecile Ruan thought Louis Fu was a little strange today. First silently gave her a birthday, then bluntly praised her beauty, and now he has to give birthday gifts. Give a gift, and let her into the room. With his urine nature, he shouldn't want to send himself, right? Cecile Ruan walked slowly towards him. Send what? Airplanes. Louis Fu didn't speak, pushed the door open, and Cecile Ruan's eyes lit up, and his breathing stopped for a second or two. In the study of more than 50 square meters, 4 2-meter-high display shelves were placed, and at least 200 model aircraft were neatly placed. Boeing full model, Airbus full model, Bombardier Aerospace Challenger Series, Dassault Aerospace Falcon Series, Hawksteri Trident. All of them. And Cecile Ruan can see when he walks in, these model aircraft are not the kind sold on the market, they are all exclusive haute couture ultra-high precision restoration. Through the glass even the dashboard in the cockpit can be clearly seen. Cecile Ruan reached out and trembled and touched the material, this texture, this feel, this fineness. I am afraid that the lifespan of these model aircraft can be compared with Wang Ba. Like it, Louis Fu's voice sounded in his ears. Cecile Ruan shuddered. He did it on purpose, he absolutely did it on purpose. But really like it? Like, very much. Cecile Ruan's villain has been spinning and jumping wildly, but she must refrain from acting like she has never seen the world in front of Louis Fu. I thought you gave me a real plane. It's not impossible. Louis Fu bowed his head and said with a smile, but there are conditions. The man's eyes seemed to be able to speak, and Cecile Ruan's heart jumped when he looked at him, feeling that he had something to say. No, he just has words. Cecile Ruan turned her back to him and looked at the other display. These are your collections. Really send me. Choose, then I'm welcome. Cecile Ruan touched this for a while, touched that for a while, and hesitated for half a day. Louis Fu kept watching her by the door, waited for a while, saw her tangled, and added, I didn't say I could only choose one. Cecile Ruan looked back at him, really? Louis Fu, in this room, you can give you whatever you like. Love it all. Everyone in this room loves it. This dog man is so personal today. He asked, like both. Cecile Ruan looked at him, wanting to be reserved but honest, so he nodded slightly. Louis Fu, but I can't. It took 2 seconds for Cecile Ruan to react to what he meant. You can send anything you like in this room. But not me. I can't give it to you. Seeing Cecile Ruan instantly return to indifference, Louis Fu was quiet for 2 seconds and then began to laugh. Still laughing. Underbeating. Cecile Ruan didn't hold back and raised a paw on his shoulder. But although she was angry, she didn't use any strength at all, and when she touched it, she was grabbed by his hand and held it on her chest. Want to hit someone again? All in Xinjiang Literature City. Cecile Ruan didn't intend to speak, struggled twice, couldn't pull his hand, so he moved his leg. It's just that she originally wanted to kick him, but he felt the motive, but instead preemptively stretched out her leg to hold her calf. Still want to move your legs? Cecile Ruan is a soft eater, not a hard person, and the more Louis Fu resists, the more she wants to move. But wearing a skirt and high heels, she was easily suppressed by this person. His hands were clenched, his thighs were pinned to his legs, and when he leaned over, Cecile Ruan was completely pinched. At this moment, the two suddenly fell strangely silent, looking at each other in this strange posture, motionless. The rainstorm outside the window was like a note, crackling, clear and intense. The room was gently lit, the air was quiet, and the sound of breathing and heartbeat lingered to cover the sound of rain in my ears. She saw Louis Fu's eyes deepen, but they looked darker in the light. And his breath is gradually approaching. Cecile Ruan frowned, his breathing tightened, and his palms slowly warmed. She didn't want to look any different, so she didn't dodge to look at each other, until Louis Fu's face turned slightly sideways and leaned against her ear to say something. His voice was very small, almost breathless, and if anyone else was at this time, he would definitely not be able to hear what he was saying. You are really beautiful today. The rain was fierce and the room was quiet, and such direct language, combined with his deep voice, made the atmosphere even more strange. It was like a heartbeat after a strenuous exercise, so that the chest cavity echoed over and over again. Cecile Ruan's breathing began to be somewhat disturbed. Suddenly, a thunder burst in the sky accompanied by lightning thunderbolts pierced the night sky, and the room suddenly lit up. As if returning to their senses, the two men let go of their hands, and at the same time, Louis Fu took a step back and looked up the window. Cecile Ruan casually picked up a Havilland Comet next to him and pressed it to his chest to suppress his heartbeat. I'm going back. Landing on my heart. Chapter 40. Cecile Ruan's bedside has a row of small searchlights, and some knickknacks and incense are placed on weekdays. These are not her arrangements, they were made for her when Si Xiaojun felt that her room was too monotonous when she first moved over. After taking Comet Havilland today, Cecile Ruan couldn't find a suitable place to put it, so he vacated the space. Coincidentally, the searchlight came down, just magnifying the shadow of the model aircraft on the opposite wall. Cecile Ruan lay on the bed, and when he opened his eyes, he could see the arrogant shadow of the plane. This shadow is as haunted as Louis Fu, and even if the searchlight is turned off, the street lamp outside the window will shine a little silhouette. Cecile Ruan rolled over, couldn't sleep, so he got up and drew the curtains tightly. After a series of operations, Cecile Ruan felt that she could sleep peacefully tonight, but as soon as she lay down, her fingers were missing in front of her, and her senses became clearer and more sensitive. In this quiet room, the low "You are really beautiful today" repeatedly lingered in her ears. What does it mean for a man to repeatedly praise a woman for being beautiful, and can it still be something that simply appreciates beauty? Originally, Cecile Ruan had been just guessing his thoughts, but tonight she was sure that Louis Fu had taken a fancy to her. The sky fell and the ground cracked, and someone was beaten and went crazy. Cecile Ruan pulled the quilt to cover his head, and the man's WeChat haunted again. Louis Fu, you forgot to take your cake. Louis Fu, send it to you. Cecile Ruan got it. The dog man not only took a fancy to her, but also saw her today, and now he is itching. Dare to press her against the wall now, really let him come to the house, wouldn't he have to press the bed? It seems that after that slap, the man's waist also straightened and he had the confidence to speak. I still want to enter her house at night. Humph, I think too beautifully. Cecile Ruan, I don't want it. Louis Fu, so I dealt with it. Cecile Ruan, as you wish, I'm going to sleep. Louis Fu, wait, what time is the plane tomorrow morning? Cecile Ruan, what for? Louis Fu, send you. At 6 o'clock the next morning, Cecile Ruan opened his eyes, reached out and touched the switch of the light, and the moment the light came on, the shadow of Comet Haviland appeared on the wall. Cecile Ruan stared at the shadow for a moment, looking as if he wasn't conscious. After a while, the mobile phone alarm went off, and Cecile Ruan came back to his senses, secretly cursing Dogman in his heart. I also came to harass me in my dreams. She sat up and opened the curtains, blurring her legs. The rain has not stopped all night, and today's flight may be delayed a lot. But even then, Cecile Ruan had to be at the airport on time. After getting up and washing up briefly, having breakfast and preparing everything, Cecile Ruan dragged the flight case and prepared to go out. Louis Fu was on time, and Cecile Ruan was about to ring the doorbell when he opened the door. Did you eat breakfast? The moment he saw Louis Fu, Cecile Ruan felt as if he had changed as a person. Standing in front of her well-dressed, he didn't look at all like he had leaned into her ear last night and whispered. Instead, Cecile Ruan was a little uncomfortable and let out a "Hmm." Let's go, it's raining today, and there will be traffic jams on the road. Oh, arriving at the first-floor lobby, Louis Fu's driver had parked the car outside. Bai Yang took the umbrella and handed it to Louis Fu. He took the umbrella, stretched it open, and put his arms around Cecile Ruan's shoulders. Let's go. At the same time, Bai Yang took Cecile Ruan's flight case and put it directly into the trunk. Cecile Ruan felt wrong. Isn't your action too natural? How did it go like this? And Bai Yang, is your consciousness too high? Are you making a little shocked face? Why is your boss soaking women like this in front of you, and you don't even react? Bai Yang didn't want to make any expressions. Yesterday, he worked hard to arrange for people to move those golden model aircraft from the Huguang mansion to the Mingchen apartment, and he had to deal with He Lanxiang's interrogation during the period, and he was very tired. All in Xinjiang Literature City, sure enough, there was a traffic jam on the road, and Cecile Ruan was afraid of being late and looked at the time several times. Bai Yang also had something in his heart. After observing the road conditions, he ordered the driver to detour, and at the same time turned back and said, President Fu, today's flight may not take off smoothly, let me notify first. Louis Fu nodded, thought of something at the same time, turned to Cecile Ruan and said, I'm going to the United States today. Cecile Ruan blinked. Come back in 10 days. Cecile Ruan was motionless. So Louis Fu saw that she had nothing to say and smiled. Tell you. Why does this sound like reporting an itinerary? Do friends need to report their trips? But Louis Fu had a calm expression, as if he didn't feel anything wrong. Okay, you think it's like this between friends, although what you do from beginning to end is not a matter of friends. When he arrived at the World Airlines gate, he was 10 minutes behind Cecile Ruan's estimate. The driver was driving to the parking lot, and Cecile Ruan calculated that it would take a few more detours to get the elevator from there and then to the conference room, so he called a stop in time. Bo Yan got out of the car to help her get the flight box, and Cecile Ruan took it and almost trotted into the building. All in Xinjiang Literature City, a flight attendant in the glass corridor on the second floor watched Cecile Ruan run in and turned around. Huh, did you see that? What, Cecile Ruan, she actually got out of Mr. Fu's car early this morning. Let me see. The people have already come in, look over there, it's President Fu's car, I'm not mistaken. What's the situation? I didn't hear that she was a flight attendant before. But in the morning, this little gossip spread in the cabin crew, and at noon, the cafeteria opened for dinner, and with the aroma of the meal, the scandal of several years ago was dug up again. This time is not an ethereal guess, someone actually saw it. Some people also said that this is not the first time that Cecile Ruan has seen him get into Mr. Fu's car, and he saw it at the gate of World Airlines not long ago. 10 days have passed, and these scandals have become somewhat sour. But these rumors have not reached the ears of the parties in a short period of time. If Cecile Ruan hadn't been to a captain's birthday party tonight, on the way there, she also received a call from Louis Fu, where Cecile Ruan had already walked to the door of the restaurant. You're back. Well, have you eaten? Nope, then wait for me. No, I have an appointment. Louis Fu laughed. You're really busy. Cecile Ruan followed the waiter to the box, his steps brisk. Yes, I have no less meals than you. I'm coming to pick you up when it's over. Cecile Ruan paused in his steps. I'm having dinner with my colleagues today. What's wrong? Are you sure you're coming to pick me up? Am I unseeable? Cecile Ruan choked. You can see people, you see people better than anyone. As you wish. Address send me. At the same time, the atmosphere in the box is lively. Today's birthday star is called Lin Hengshi, who has worked in the World Airlines for several years, is a young captain, especially hospitable, as long as he has contact with people, can quickly become friends. So no matter which department he is familiar with, on his birthday directly pulled a large group of shouting. There are flight departments, there are cabin crew departments, as well as aircraft departments and dispatch departments. Due to the large number of people, he booked a large private room, and there were 3 tables in it before he could barely seat everyone. It was about 7 o'clock, and Cecile Ruan hadn't arrived at 6:50 yet. What time is Cecile Ruan not coming? Who knows, maybe I'll go on a date with President Fu. Look at your sour tone, what's wrong with people dating? Who is sour? Express your admiration, it's been a few years. It can be regarded as an iron pestle sharpened into a needle. I don't have this perseverance for me. What you say has a nose and eyes, is this true? All in Xinjiang Literature City, can this still be fake? It wasn't the first time I'd seen her come out of the Mingchen apartment. Ni Tong was originally eating melons, but when he heard this, he still couldn't help but speak. There is a saying, Cecile Ruan herself lives in a famous courtier, and I have been to her house. Chancellor. Then she's quite rich. Another flight attendant interjected, even if Cecile Ruan chases backwards, women are not allowed to chase backwards this year. Yes, if the man is unmarried and the woman is unmarried, it doesn't matter who chases whom. Is this a backwards chase problem? This is a backward posting. Just then, the box door was pushed open and Cecile Ruan walked in. The table by the door was quiet, and everyone looked up. About half of the people at this table were stunned. No matter how Cecile Ruan managed to get Louis Fu, in short, they have a different relationship now. If they offend her, they will have no good fruit to eat. The atmosphere on this side became strange, and although the other 2 tables were not gossiping just now, they probably heard something. Lin Hengshi, as today's owner, was a little embarrassed, but he had to come out to play rounds. Xiao Ruan is here. Would you like to sit down at our table and drink? Cecile Ruan didn't hear the gossip just now, and saw that this table really had no place, so he asked, is there still my place? Yes, just squeeze it. Lin Hengshi took her over, and a few co-pilots moved out with chairs. But the feng shui of this table is not very good, and Yu Chen and Jiang Ziyue sit opposite them. Although Jiang Ziyue did not participate in the topic just now, she has heard a lot these days. It seems that she really underestimated Cecile Ruan, this co-pilot, she really sits. But with these rumors, at least Yu Chen would no longer stare at Cecile Ruan. There was Lin Hengshi's active atmosphere, everyone pretended that nothing had happened, eating, drinking, and punching, and more than 2 hours passed in a flash. After the wine was full, someone came to Cecile Ruan with a glass of wine, first praised her for her beauty today, and had to toast her with a glass of wine, and the nice words came one after another. The rainbow fart blew so loudly that a few of the people present could not hear it as flattery. Originally, no one poked it, but Jiang Ziyue found that Yu Chen looked at Cecile Ruan several times, so he seized this opportunity to learn the tone and said, Vice Ruan is now in a good harvest of love and career, and people are in good spirits at happy events, can they not be beautiful? Lin Hengshi's atmosphere that was hard to pull back was beaten back to before liberation by Jiang Ziyue's words. Who can't hear what she means? Yu Chen frowned, can't you still block your mouth with food? Shut up if you can't speak. It doesn't matter what others say, but Yu Chen protects Cecile Ruan so much. Jiang Ziyue's anger suddenly came up. Originally she didn't plan to say Cecile Ruan, just wanted to remind Yu Chen not to covet a woman who shouldn't covet, but this man came against her. It's just that in the end, in public, no one under her face is good for her own man's face, and the spearhead is aimed at Cecile Ruan. I don't know much about talking, but I am loyal to my ears. We have been colleagues for so many years. I still want to remind you, the higher the status of men, the more difficult it is to grasp, but don't be careless, turn back and get nothing. Have you heard about the girl we knew before? The children are all pregnant, and they are going to marry the son-brother of the steel industry. But what happened? In the end, they still did not get married, and now who dares to take over with children? The atmosphere dropped to freezing point, and even Lin Hongji didn't know how to round the field. Cecile Ruan was still thinking about what they were talking about, but now that Jiang Ziyue had said everything, she was a little silly if she couldn't understand it. At this time, her mobile phone still vibrated, and it was a message from Louis Fu. Louis Fu, how long will you have to wait when I arrive? She typed quickly and replied, don't come, lest people think I'm seducing you again, smiley face. After this message was sent, she threw her phone away and looked up at Jiang Ziyue. Sister Jiang, if you have something to say, just say it. Jiang Ziyue didn't open his face, and muttered strangely, don't you understand what I said? What do I understand? Say I seduced President Fu. Jiang Ziyue was about to speak, when Yu Chen slammed the table. Okay, you have nothing to do and go home, people's birthdays, what are you talking about here? What are you yelling at me? Yu Chen, what do you mean? Jiang Ziyue doesn't care about any face now, it's enough to protect once, and protect twice. Don't forget that you are the one who is going to get married, who are you protecting here? No, why are you arguing? I haven't figured out the topic here. If you want to quarrel and go home and argue, let's make it clear first. Cecile Ruan said, Sister Jiang, a few years ago, you babbled that I seduced President Fu. Why do you want to get married now? Why are you so interested in my private life? When Yu Chen heard this, he looked at Jiang Ziyue in surprise. You said that. What kind of eyes are you? No matter what Cecile Ruan said, it was always Yu Chen's every move that made Jiang Ziyue angry. What did I say? Now don't you see the facts? What facts? The box door was suddenly pushed open, and the table next to the door was instantly quiet, and then the entire box was silent. Everyone looked over there. No one knows why Louis Fu suddenly appeared here. He was standing in the doorway, his face calm, his gaze faintly swept over the people here, and he couldn't see the emotion. But often it is not visible that emotions are the most terrible. Everyone's hearts jumped, and Ai Tong didn't even hold the melon in his hand steadily, and one of them fell to the ground without paying attention. Louis Fu's gaze finally fell on Cecile Ruan, more irritated than angry. The situation that was stabilized after a slap may be disrupted by this group of people again. Cecile Ruan knew Louis Fu was coming, and he wasn't so shocked, but he wasn't in a good mood and didn't even look at him. The atmosphere in the room is recognizable, and Louis Fu's footsteps are also infinitely amplified, step by step, stepping on people's hearts, for fear that he will walk in front of him. However, Louis Fu just walked over to Cecile Ruan and reached out to her. Have you finished eating? I'll send you back. Cecile Ruan held her anger and slapped his hand away. Louis Fu withdrew his hand, leaned over slightly, and asked, they say you seduced me. Cecile Ruan sneered and ignored him. Didn't you tell them I was chasing you?
Welcome to Storyverse. If you have any novels you'd like to see or stories you'd like to share, feel free to leave us a comment or send us a private message. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button to join our community of avid readers and romance enthusiasts.
Landing on My Heart, Chapter 41. The overhead lights were shining, and the faces of several people in the room were pale. Only then did everyone react and stand up one after another. Jiang Ziyue was still stunned, and was dragged up by Yu Chen. She stumbled, her hands were on the table, her face was like earth, and her lips slowly lost their blood color. The outside of the box was extremely noisy, the sound of people was loud, and the aroma of food and wine lingered, which set off the already silent atmosphere in the box even more suffocating. After a long time, no one spoke, not even a sound of clothes rubbing. Lin Hongji was still holding the wine glass in his hand, not up or down, his mouth opened and closed, and for a long time, he spit out two words, President Fu. Louis Fu originally leaned over in front of Cecile Ruan, supported the table with one hand, and when he heard this, his eyelids lifted, and Lin Hongji closed his mouth. The air pressure in the room is lower. Cecile Ruan, who had been silent since Louis Fu finished speaking, suddenly picked up his bag and stood up, lowered his head and pushed Louis Fu's hand away and walked towards the door. As they passed the table by the door, the people who had just discussed her took a step back, afraid to be next to her. But Cecile Ruan walked to the door, suddenly turned around, and whispered, Captain Lin, that. I didn't think about making your birthday look like this today, sorry. Lin Hongji is about to cry, don't cue me, it really has nothing to do with me. When Cecile Ruan walked through the door, everyone's gaze was not retracted. Why did Cecile Ruan's arrogance suddenly drop? Her voice was small, and if they had just read correctly, her ears were red. This is pretending to be weak in front of President Fu. Louis Fu did not immediately follow, The hand pushed away by Cecile Ruan hung on the edge of his pants, turned his wrist, and looked up at the table with indistinguishable emotions. No one understood what he meant by this, but he felt that a string had been caught in his head, and his cheeks were frozen. Immediately afterwards, when Louis Vu's next sentence came out, the string suddenly broke. "That's how you made it harder for me." Although it sounds so interesting and helpless, it is more of a clear warning. When Cecile Ruan was present just now, there was still a little gentleness in his tone, and when he said this, his tone and demeanor were unusually calm to the point that there was no temperature, like the deep sea before the storm, with huge waves lurking. Louis Vu only dropped the sentence and turned to go out. Lin Hongji wanted to chase him out and say something, but he couldn't move his legs, and he didn't know what to say. The box fell into a deathly silence again. What broke this situation was a sentence from the very table. "All in Xinjiang Literature City, Cecile Ruan has such a big temper." Everyone woke up like a dream, and they all looked towards Enai Tong. Enai Tong was still in a state of stunned, his eyes were blank. "What's the matter?" "It turns out that President Fu is chasing her." She felt like a fool and once told Cecile Ruan how to chase men. When she said it, someone naturally answered, "I'm going. I thought it was a canon-friend relationship, but the result is this, how to do it now." "What, did she just hear what we said?" "Groove, I still want to be promoted to purser this year." Groove groove groove. Who the hell passed it on first? Before I figured things out, word spread. Now okay, let's be buried together. In the midst of everyone's noise, Jiang Ziyue pursed his lips, his nails dug into his palms, and his breath almost overflowed. Yuchen suddenly grabbed the wine glass in front of him and smashed it on the ground, bang, and the box was quiet again. The glass slag bounced onto Jiang Ziyue's instep, and she suddenly raised her head and stared at Yuchen in disbelief, her expression almost on the verge of cracking. "Comfortable now?" Yuchen's face turned red, extending to his neck, and his forehead was blue. "Let you shut up, you didn't hear it, just you have a mouth that can speak." Jiang Ziyue's eyes were almost bloodshot, and he shrieked, "Are you still a man?" "It's a big deal that I resigned, afraid of what she would do." Yuchen was so angry that he had already raised his hand, and when he raised it above his head, everyone rushed up to stop him, and he himself recovered his senses at this moment. His hand fell heavily, and he overturned the stool next to him. "You have to go by yourself, don't drag Lao Tzu." "Yuchen, pilots like them are different from Cecile Ruan." Cecile Ruan is not an airline training, the contract is loose, but Yuchen's category was selected to sign the airline. Directional training, high learning costs are all paid by the airline, so the contract is signed very deadly. There is almost no possibility of job hopping. Even if he has to forcibly change jobs, the default money will be compensated to him bankruptcy. Now that Jiang Ziyue has offended his top boss, it is difficult to guarantee that Yuchen will not be implicated. The company cannot be changed, it can only be slaughtered. All in Xinjiang Literature City to a small extent. In the future, the flight is all short haul, and there are several flights every day, and the proportion of the most tired takeoff and landing time in the total flight time directly soars. Or say to the air traffic control, when the flow control is controlled, all his flight will be moved back and take off, and the person will grind in the cockpit, and there will be no hourly wage without taking off. In a big way, it is not impossible to directly find a head to a co-pilot. If it is a little more absolute, it is not impossible to drop a lifelong co-pilot. The more Yuchen thought about it, the more afraid he became. Just looking at Louis Vu's gentle speech in front of Cecile Ruan just now, it was not impossible for him to make this. He himself knew what a man could do for the woman he loved. Especially when the man is in a high position and has power in his hands, there is so much that can be done. Yuchen could think of this, and how the other pilots could not think of it. They all began to worry about their future. And at this time Enai Tong came out again to break the deadlock. She was afraid at first, calmed down, and said, "It should be okay." Everyone's eyes were on her, the spotlight was too bright. She took a step back and said in a hushed voice, "I was also before. So what, anyway, it's not very pleasant with her, she didn't treat me, what about me?" Now the focus is on Cecile Ruan. The point is Mr. Fu. Everyone was too lazy to pay attention to Enai Tong, and began to worry about their future again. And the situation on the other side is not optimistic. When Louis Vu walked out, Cecile Ruan walked alone with his bag and the wind at his feet. "Cecile Ruan!" Louis Vu shouted from behind, and seeing that the person in front was not moving, he stepped over in 2 or 3 steps and grabbed her wrist. Before he finished speaking, Louis Vu paused in his voice. He looked down at Cecile Ruan's face. Cecile Ruan hung his head, spotted his movement, slammed his hand away, and continued walking. Dogman, stinky dogman. After a few silent words, Cecile Ruan's wrist was grabbed again. She turned and struggled a little. You let me go. Without pulling out his hand, he could only stare up at him. I'll fix that. Louis Vu said, there will definitely be no such rumors in the future. First dissipate the gas. She still stared at Louis Vu and did not speak. That's not what she had in mind. Louis Vu, get in the car first, take you home, it will rain in a while. After that, he looked back and saw that the driver had been driving slowly and following the two of them, and was now stopping on the side of the road where they were standing. While he wasn't looking, Cecile Ruan withdrew his hand and slapped him on the back. Louis Vu only thought she was still angry about that, turned around and put her shoulder on the shoulder, and said seriously, I said, I will give you an explanation for this matter. Then, by the roadside light, Louis Vu could see that Cecile Ruan's face was blushing like a ripe apple, and faintly spread to his fair neck. The two looked at each other like this, and neither spoke first. About 10 seconds later, Cecile Ruan suddenly slapped him on the shoulder again. The strength is not heavy, but it is not light, it is with emotions. Louis Vu frowned and took a deep breath, feeling his patience being worn away little by little. You say something. He lowered his eyes. Do you still have to slap me to relieve my breath? Cecile Ruan clenched his fists. Although she didn't know what she looked like now, she felt that her neck was completely enveloped by a heat that she emitted. In short, she felt that her face must have been flushed. Face out, Louis Vu naturally doesn't really stick his face out. He just looked at Cecile Ruan, his dark eyes indecipherable. There was another silent star, and just like just now, Cecile Ruan suddenly reached out and touched the side of Louis Vu's face with his palm, pushing him aside. Why do you have to say that there? After dropping this sentence, the person immediately walked to the side of the road, quickly pulled the car door and sat up. This slap pressed over, like a cat's claw. There was a soft feeling. There was still the residual warmth of Cecile Ruan's palm on his cheek, and Louis Vu reached out and saw Cecile Ruan's faint side face through the car window. After a moment, he looked down and smiled, turned and got into the car. The driver drove towards the famous minister in silence. The back seat was spacious, and Louis Vu folded his legs and unfastened his cuffs while glancing sideways at Cecile Ruan. Cecile Ruan squeezed to the far side, facing the window, but found Louis Vu watching her in the reflection. What's wrong? Are you too embarrassed to ask? Cecile Ruan kicked him out of the car with his leg lifted. Why do I usually look like I am every day, so do you think I won't be ashamed? In front of so many people, and all of them are colleagues, you suddenly say, didn't you tell them that I was chasing you? Is this a human thing? Although I know that Louis Vu just fancy himself, it's okay to talk about this kind of thing in private, and saying it in public is simply a large-scale confession scene. Which woman is not ashamed to change? Ever since Louis Vu said that sentence in the box, Cecile Ruan's chest cavity rose and his whole face began to heat up. All in Xinjiang Literature City, when I quarreled with Jiang Ziyue, I didn't have this emotional ups and downs. And the dog man was good, his face did not change color and his heart did not beat, and he asked her casually what was wrong. After taking a sharp breath, Cecile Ruan calmed down and was about to speak calmly, but the man spoke again. What I said today is serious. Cecile Ruan. There was obviously an empty seat between the two, but Cecile Ruan felt that the surroundings were very tight, and Louis Vu's breath seemed to linger beside her. Oh. Louis Vu looked sideways at her blushing and felt amused. You mean to agree? Agree, don't be too confident. Cecile Ruan raised her chin as if she heard some joke, and snorted coldly, you should try it. If you chase me, I will take your last name. As soon as the words fell, Cecile Ruan suddenly choked, and his brain buzzed numbly. The front seat driver suddenly coughed, not knowing if he was laughing at her. Depend on, Cecile Ruan closed her eyes in regret. Today, whether the brain was burned out, or the mind was all hidden, such a mentally retarded word was actually spoken. I managed to add a shame to myself. You're right, of course. Louis Vu, shut up. Landing on my heart. Chapter 42. As October's tail swept by, the weather turned cooler rapidly. In November, the leaves on the side of the road visibly turned yellow, the air began to dry, and some pedestrians on the road even put on down jackets. Also changing is Cecile Ruan's work environment. She has been busy with the F1, first stage co-pilot, exam recently, usually reading a book, sometimes sitting in the cockpit and waiting for the flow control to take out her mobile phone to look twice. On the day of the exam, she came out of the examination room, looked at the time, it was still early, and went to the staff cafeteria to eat. After eating and finding an empty seat on her plate, she had just eaten 2 bites when she felt someone coming towards her. Cecile Ruan looked up and saw that it was a co-pilot he knew, so he dragged his plate to make some room. Who knew that the co-pilot saw that it was Cecile Ruan who was sitting, and immediately grinned and said, "Good afternoon, Xiao Ruan, huh? Why didn't I see this rib you hit? I'll go to the window again." Maybe he went to the window of the Siberian cafeteria to make ribs, but he didn't come back. Cecile Ruan came back to her senses, and during this time, her situation in the company was the flight of 1,000 mountains, the disappearance of 10,000 male men. Male colleagues, single and non-single, all maintain a delicate relationship with her, and can't wait to write "we are just pure coworkers" on their faces. Even if she shared a link in the circle of friends, no male colleagues liked her. Okay, Cecile Ruan kind of understands. Louis Fu only needs one sentence to label her as owned by Fu, directly cutting off the creation of love rivals from the root. As long as she stays in the World Airlines for one day, no other man in this company dares to rob the woman with the boss. What an open pursuit method. But this Fu label is not without benefits. For example, she flew long distances all this time, looked at the task schedule, and did the same for the next week. But pilots who fly on domestic routes want to fly long distances, and in addition to high hourly wages, they also have longer breaks. Even the usual flow control seems to be changing slightly, and Cecile Ruan finds himself queuing shorter and often prioritized on the runway. In this way, the label seems to have clearly written Louis Fu requests all departments to facilitate and provide necessary assistance to the licensee. Cecile Ruan feels like a walking Fu passport now. She even wanted to question Louis Fu if this was inappropriate abuse, but thinking about it, this can't be what Louis Fu ordered. It's just that the internet is too developed, and a word can spread around the world only through a satellite communication, not to mention that this is still just a company. Whether it is these people's avoidance or the rudder of the wind, they are like a pair of invisible hands, locking Cecile Ruan and Louis Fu. This atmosphere made Cecile Ruan think of when she was in high school. There was also a boy who confessed to her publicly, which made a lot of noise, and the whole school knew it. And that boy is still a cool school bully, usually arrogant and domineering in school, and even the teacher can't control him. So when he confessed, all the boys who usually offered Cecile Ruan their courtesy hid far away. The school is so big, the two usually meet by chance, plus one party deliberately does it. Cecile Ruan feels that these people are everywhere they go. The people around them were still old, making it seem as if the two of them already had something. At that time, Cecile Ruan was very irritated by this every day, and every time she saw the mocking eyes or mocking tone of others, she wanted to rush up and beat someone. But now Cecile Ruan took the spoon and stirred the soup in the bowl. She doesn't seem to be particularly cranky. There is also no urge to punch people. Is there any difference between Louis Fu in Shiheng and the school bully in high school? No, they are all domineering snakes. Cecile Ruan thought, probably because Louis Fu is her boss. Just thinking about it, a dinner plate suddenly rested in front of him. Cecile Ruan wondered which colleague had so boldly sacrificed his life to pick flowers, and felt a little happy that his charm overwhelmed Louis Fu's lustful power. But when she looked up, it was N.I. Tong sitting in front of her. When N.I. Tong sat down, his expression was a little uneasy, and he looked around for a while before he spoke. There's a thing. Cecile Ruan put down his chopsticks and looked up. You say it bluntly. N.I. Tong didn't want to say this, but she had been thinking about it for a long time, and she couldn't live without saying it. It's just that the cafeteria is full of people, and she hesitated for a long time and asked, "Have you finished eating? How about we go out and talk?" Cecile Ruan looked at her and finished the soup in one gulp. Let's go. The two walked outside the cafeteria, but there were still many people, so N.I. Tong pulled Cecile Ruan to a stairwell in the building. It's just, my master was complained about by a guest yesterday. Cecile Ruan, and then, N.I. Tong's eyes rolled around, and he didn't have the confidence to speak. That is, if you know that ordinary passengers complain, the company has to verify to see whether it is valid or invalid, but the complaint by the customer is directly valid, and then. Cecile Ruan glanced at her watch. I'll give you a minute, I'll go home if you don't finish. N.I. Tong was nervous, and immediately spit out like a pea monster. It's that matter, it's actually not a big deal. In the past, when I encountered this situation, the most was to be grounded for a while, but my master was expelled. I think this may be President Fu's decision, but it seems to be a little too much. I also know that my request is a little difficult, but can you say to President Fu, don't fire directly, leave some feelings, okay? Cecile Ruan. Cecile Ruan spent half a minute cutting Tong's words in his head. Reached out and patted Tong's shoulder. No, is it something I usually do to make you mistakenly think that I am a kind and generous little fairy who does not hold revenge? Tong's face instantly collapsed, and she turned red with embarrassment, and she whispered for a long time and said, oh, I see. No, mainly because of the last incident. Now brother Yu seems to have a fight with my master. She is almost 30 years old. If she has no job anymore, what can she do? After that, she was about to turn around and leave, but there was a sharp shout behind her. All in Xinjiang Literature City, Tong. What are you doing? Jiang Ziyue held a wad of documents in his hand, which were social security documents returned by the Ministry of Personnel. She stood on the stairs, her papers crumpled. It was the first time Cecile Ruan had seen her show such a direct fierce gaze. Before the person moved, a wad of documents smashed on Tong first. Tong was so frightened that she jerked back to the corner and looked at Jiang Ziyue in horror. It's not, I just. Who asked you to intercede? Are you full and can't find something to do? After she finished speaking, she turned to look at Cecile Ruan. Don't worry, you can't afford to mess with me. I really think I can't live if I don't be a flight attendant, and I want to lick my face and beg you. Dream. Cecile Ruan spread her hands. I didn't say anything. She also felt very annoying. Obviously she had never glanced at Yu Chen with her eyes open, but she had been regarded as an imaginary enemy by Jiang Ziyue from beginning to end, and now she had directly torn her face. As for, Jiang Ziyue stood on the stairs, quite condescending, staring at Cecile Ruan. Don't be too proud, you really think you're the president's wife. It's not even close. Stop, stop. Cecile Ruan felt that this matter still needed to be made clear. I don't have anything with Louis Fu, I'm single now. Cecile Ruan was just clarifying the facts, and in Jiang Ziyue's ears, it became a show-off of I haven't promised him yet, he will protect me like this, what can I do? So when you're young, you really think that when others chase you, they hold you in the palm of their hands. Men are not all the same, now watch you play with you freshly, who remembers who you are after the freshness. It's annoying. Cecile Ruan wanted to go home, didn't want to talk to her, and needed a sentence to stop the conversation. Understand and understand, don't say that raw rice is cooked and matured this year, even if it is boiled into popcorn, it should run the same, right? As soon as the words fell, as Cecile Ruan expected, Jiang Ziyue's face really became very exciting. What to think, 9012, who cannot live without a man? With the license in hand, you can't fly a plane anywhere, really only Louis Fu has a big plane at home. All in Xinjiang Literature City, moreover, she and Louis Fu have not yet brushed each other. To avoid the next verbal shot, Cecile Ruan slipped away in time. Although Jiang Ziyue's words did not leave any traces in Cecile Ruan's heart, she still silently scolded Louis Fu twice. The dog man cut her peach blossom without saying and provoked her right and wrong. Just thinking about it, the dog man sent a message over. Louis Fu has been busy these days, flying to several cities in a few days, and Cecile Ruan has hardly seen him or contacted him. It's him who calls from time to time. Call and call, but there is nothing serious to say, just talk about bits and pieces, and every time he can't talk for a few minutes, he hangs up the phone to get busy. But every time he answered the phone for a few minutes, Cecile Ruan felt strange. It's because I didn't talk about anything serious, but it seemed abnormal. There is a reasonable suspicion that he is boiling frogs in warm water. Louis Fu, finished exams. Cecile Ruan replied to him as he walked. Cecile Ruan, I finished the exam early. All in Xinjiang Literature City, without waiting for him to reply, Cecile Ruan asked again. Cecile Ruan, you opened Jiang Ziyue. Louis Fu, who is Jiang Ziyue? Cecile Ruan. Cecile Ruan, that's the flight attendant. That day to quarrel with me, do you goldfish remember? I drove it. A familiar voice sounded. Cecile Ruan's footsteps suddenly stopped, and when he looked up, Louis Fu was standing in the setting sun. His body seemed to be plated with a faint layer of golden light, which made his facial features particularly soft. And the moment she saw his eyes, Cecile Ruan's heart jumped. What to jump? What do you jump? Didn't people admit that he opened it? I didn't say it was for you, stop for me, don't jump. Louis Fu, going home. Louis Fu stretched out his hand towards her. Let's go, I'll send you. His movements were so natural that when Cecile Ruan reacted, his hand was already raised and was about to be placed in his palm. Let's just say that this person is boiling frogs in warm water. In order not to let him see the flaw, Cecile Ruan slapped his hand away in disgust. The weather is good, I'm going to walk. After saying that, she walked towards the gate. Louis Fu silently followed her side by side, and the driver drove silently behind. Cecile Ruan's steps are somewhat mechanical, while Louis Fu keeps pace with her. Louis Fu, Cecile Ruan felt that this had to be asked, and that he couldn't be as sentimental as he was. You fired her, is it because of me? Louis Fu seemed to find it strange for her to ask this question. If it weren't for her, the flight attendant of thousands of people, where would he have the spare time to take care of one of the nameless flight attendants? How else, for whom? Cecile Ruan was stunned for a moment, feeling a little crispy and numb. She actually understood that this matter only took a look at Louis Fu, and there were naturally people below to deal with it for him. It didn't take much effort for him. But she still felt a hint of unreasonable favoritism. Oh no, after that, she quietly inquired with a few familiar flight attendants, and indeed no one dared to mention those rumors again, even in private. The flight attendants told her that when the leaders of each department held a regular meeting, they had specifically emphasized if these rumors came out again, they would all go to the personnel department to receive the dismissal payment, and the World Airlines would not be short of that money. Well, not just a hint of favoritism. She glanced up at Louis Fu. Mr. Fu, you have a bit of a breakdown in the distinction between public and private. Sister, you don't seem to be a little self-aware. Louis Fu turned to look at her. You have spread wild on my head again and again, and you still think that I have a clear distinction between public and private. Snap, Ruan Xiao Frog seemed to fall into warm water in the invisible sound of hitting the face and couldn't get up.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, remember to subscribe to our channel for more captivating illustrated romance audiobooks. Don't miss out on our latest releases and be part of our growing community. Hit that subscribe button and embark on an enchanting journey with us.